Om Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Dayo Shritva Pranamami Mahor Mahor. Today the topic given to me is again Jnana Yoga, existential inquiry, and what exactly Vedanta is about. So through a few ideas, in a step-by-step process, we will discuss these ideas in as simple a form as possible, so that we can actually apply it, do it in our everyday lives. Because Vedanta is a very powerful philosophy. Existential inquiry, you come to Vedanta. So it is not another thought construct as such, but a penetration into the basic fundamental facts of our existence. Like for example, let me give you examples. How do we feel ourselves to be? Tell me. How do you feel yourself to be? You know, Arthur Eddington, he once said, mind is the most obvious thing in our experience. Everything else is remote inference. You feel your mind, isn't it? What's happening in your mind at any given moment of time. But Vedanta says something even more fundamental to this. It will tell you, awareness is the basic thing you experience. Even thoughts, there are times when thoughts can stop. When you are aware of thoughts without participating in a thought process. So the thing is, awareness is more basic to the thought process. This is something you have to catch by yourself. Not because a scripture is telling it or somebody is telling it to us. You must feel the reality of this for yourself, and then you will see Vedanta is very simple, very easy. Yesterday what we discussed about bhakti, same things can be applied to Vedanta. It is Svayam Pramana. It is self-evident. It is the most obvious fact of your life. Only we have not observed it so acutely. So when you don't observe something acutely, you know what happens? It becomes a build-up thing. It becomes something external to yourself, which you have to integrate into your thinking. Vedanta is not actually like that. In fact, if you remove everything from your mind, what is left over is Vedanta. Awareness will be left over if you remove thoughts from your mind. So the thing is, it is the basic fundamental fact of your life is what we are calling pure awareness, which is the basic datum with which Vedanta is working with. Let me give you an example from your everyday lives. Now I give this to students, those IIT students, I give them this example. See, when suppose you click your selfie. Young people keep doing that. Now you click your selfie and then you are admiring your selfie or watching your, what exactly are you doing? Tell me, what is watching what? Okay, tell me yourself. The mind is watching your body, isn't it? Now your intellect is seeing your mind watching your body. That's why you are able to say this. Right? Do you agree with me? Your intellect is watching your mind, seeing your body. And the whole thing is happening in your awareness. Because you are aware, your intellect is watching your mind, observing your body. So what is the fundamental fact about you then? Tell me. Awareness. That is most you. The rest is external to your awareness. Please see this. That is why you can see your intellect interprets the activity. It is seeing the mind, observing your body. A simple selfie will teach you Vedanta if you are keen on knowing the real I. Who is it that is saying I? What is this I sense in us? What does it mean? What is it pointing towards? What is the unchanging element in me? So you see, these are all fundamental questions. Everybody asks them in life. If an answer is not forthcoming, or if you are not penetrating into this research, then it becomes a theory for you. You construct a philosophy and you dwell on it mentally. But it is the most obvious fact of your existence. You just have to pointedly ask for it. Ask the question and dive in. Diving in is most important. You see, this research is entirely subjective, isn't it? You are going to now watch your mind. And you acknowledge your intellect watching your mind, and you acknowledge your awareness to be behind the intellect, which is seeing the entire process. So this is how we actually study. Vedanta Vichar means this. Basically, Vedanta has to do with existential inquiry. It is not conceptual thought. You understand? Like you take up a book, it tells you you are the Atman, you are not the body and mind. Then you make a model out of it, a Panchakosha model or something like that out of it. This is conceptual thinking. You are thinking in terms of concepts. But Vedanta is essentially Vichar. I do it by myself, within myself. And the whole thing will become very clear. Just like how you saw just now, there are different dimensions of your own personality. The body is the most external crust of your personality. You are hardly identified with it. Please observe these facts. Only if there is some pain or something happened, you became body conscious, then you are aware of it. Otherwise, you are rarely conscious of it. But mind, you are more aware, more conscious of it. You know very well what's happening because we are primarily thinking beings. And most obvious thing about your personality is the awareness part. In your awareness, thoughts are taking place. Due to the presence of your awareness, thinking has meaning, thinking has connection, thinking has coordination. So we are thinking beings. So your very thought can lead you to that, if it is acute enough. So this is what existential inquiry basically means. There are a number of, you can say, clues which can lead you towards a Vedantic process, which I have discussed earlier also. Since you have been seeing the videos and all that, you must be quite aware of it. Existential inquiry is a process of going inward, of understanding. And then what happens is, due to existential inquiry, the mind becomes crystal clear. If Vedanta Vichar is done on an everyday basis, it is as purifying as a bath in the Ganga. You know, in Uttarakhand, there is a famous saying, one bout of Vedanta Vichar also will not go waste. It will create the necessary sanskars for you, for a deep spiritual life. Because it's about you. Who is not interested in himself, tell me? So Vedanta Vichar is something, it should be part and parcel of our life. Everyday basis you are discriminating acutely, perfectly within your mind. And the conclusion you will come at, without any help you can come to Vedanta. Please know this, because it is the reality about you. That awareness is your real nature. Nobody needs to tell you this. It's happening, even right now it's happening. It's in your awareness that you are perceiving mentally all these impressions, that you are thinking, and by which you are correcting thoughts, forming concepts in your mind. It's happening right now. So tracking the essential I, the core of the human personality structure, that is what Vedanta actually is. So you see, it is just part and parcel of our life. Don't make it into a great something. In India also many people will tell you, Yog Vedanta वो सब बड़ी बड़ी बातें हैं. कहाँ की बड़ी बड़ी बातें हैं? आपका सत्य है ये. This is the truth about you. So don't push it away from you. You are a Vedantin all the time. You are a yogi. This is your essential nature. You know, at one place, I think Holy Mother says this, that the natural tendency of the human mind, Thakur says this in the Gospel also, Brahman is the actual home of the human mind. That is your real state actually. When the mind starts working, all this diversity comes into effect. But your real nature is, or whether you are thinking or not, you are awareness. Whether you have perceptions or not, you are awareness. Whether you feel conscious or unconscious, you are awareness. You are always the Atman, occasionally identified with mind activity, very occasionally identified with body. This is your real nature. Clear your mind and this will become obvious to you. It's not another theory which I am constructing. So, this being the state of affairs, this being your real nature, our greatest sensitivity should be towards this. This is what is expected of a Vedantin. That is why you see Vivekananda's talks in the US, Jnana Yoga lectures. Again and again he is talking of these facts. Assert your real nature, he says. Assert your real nature. Track the real core of existence. It's you. That is what you actually are. And the rest will follow. Swamiji used to actually say this is a kind of dehypnotization, isn't it? We are hypnotized into believing we are body and mind. This is the actual adhyas taking place. Adhyas is something very interesting in Advaita Vedanta. Superimposition, how does that? I'll go briefly into that. How does it take place? Why do we think that we are the body and mind? Because I'll tell you in one simple sentence why you think like that. Because the world expects you to be like that. If you distance yourself from the world a bit, you will understand you never feel the body unless you want to. You never even feel identified with thought unless you are possessive about something or you want to. You want to invest your energy into that, then you get identified. By yourself, you are only self-aware at any given moment of time. You are the witness of your thoughts, you are the witness of the absence of thought. You are the witness of your perceptions, you are the witness of the absence of perceptions. You are the witness of your memories, you are the witness of the absence of memories. At any given moment of time, this is the fact about you. How can you miss it? So you see, this is what is called the phenomenological method in philosophy, which means how does something feel to me, not to the outer world. How does my perception feel to me? How do my thoughts feel to me? From your standpoint, what have you to say about yourself? This is a phenomenological approach. It is the heart of Vedanta. Today we are using different words, what we are calling phenomenology in Vedanta or philosophy is called neurophenomenology in a certain sense, in neurophysiology. And it's called existential inquiry basically in Vedanta. Almost similar things these are. So get used to this form of thinking. You see, it is not something strange, isn't it? This should be part and parcel of life, because when a child is born, there was a Western philosopher who started celebrating his child's birthday when the child started saying I. Not when the body came into birth. When it started saying I, then he said, yes, now the identity has started. Before that, that should be the birthday, actually. When the I begins, you have sprung into manifestation. So he started celebrating that we should become sensitive to this. The I sense in us is the greatest clue to the Atman. That's why you constantly feel this sense of I. And that's why who am I is a question everybody puts in life. So pursuing this research is important. Now let me tell you how to go into this. Many people ask this question that, this is definitely the thing and this is what I want to pursue. But it's very difficult. There's a lot of activity in the mind which is an obstacle. It's a fact. If the mind is not very clear, Vedanta will appear like a philosophy, like a theoretical construct. If the mind is very clear, it's the most obvious fact of your life. It's like this. So how do I now clear the mind? See, it is a fact, it's a psychological fact that if there is too much erratic mind activity and thought which is uncontrolled, then you only see the surface aspect of things. You are not going to see what is the foundation of your thought process. You can't see that. Just like a lake, if it's too stormy on the surface, you can't see what's in the bottom. We were recently on the St. Lawrence River. You can see far into the bottom. The waters are so clear. The waters are so pure actually. So this is so even with our mind. If it is crystal clear, Vedantic facts will just pop up in your mind. But if it is dense and turbid and wavy on the surface, then Vedanta is very difficult. So now how do we clear this situation? See, you are going to see only what is in your mind. Perception, the nature of perception is like that. Since the instrument of perception is the mind, through the mind you see. If the mind has dense things there, it's very dense with various things, it's going to deflect your knowledge, which is pretty obvious. Vivekananda used to give this example of the trunk of, the stump of a tree. You remember in a garden, it seems in a park, somebody had cut down a tree, only the stump was there. And it so happened that it was evening hour, twilight hour, and a thief came there. He was escaping from a policeman. But because it was dusk, he couldn't see the stump properly. He mistook it for the policeman. And he ran in the opposite direction. Now fear was in his mind, so he saw the stump as a policeman. He ran away and the policeman came there. I am modifying Swamiji's example a little just to show you how psychological reality surfaces in our mind due to the emotions and thoughts predominant in our mind. The policeman comes there and he is in search of the thief. So he suddenly sees the stump as the thief. And then he goes closer and sees it's not the thief, it's a stump, and he again goes away. Then somebody was waiting for his friend. So he comes there, he thinks that's the friend sitting there. So he comes closer, no, it's the stump, goes away. A lover comes there, thinks the beloved is there. And no, it's not the girl, so he also goes away. So everybody who came there came with a certain emotion in their mind. So they could see only that. And if you go there without any emotion in your mind, without any commotion in your mind, then you will see the stump of the tree as the stump. So this is what exactly happens in perception also. Why is it important to clear and enhance our perception? Otherwise you will not see reality as it is. Vivekananda used to say, existence itself is Brahman, God. When the mind comes into operation, and the mind with all these storms, then it is going to see this diversified world of all sorts of things. And then we are constantly blaming world, we are blaming outside reality for all the effects in our mind, for all our perceptions. The fact is you must clear the mind. That is the source of yoga and Vedanta. The mind is the instrument of perception. In fact, in yoga, the process which we follow initially is you remove everything from your mind. The very first sutra says that, Yogastu Chitta Vritti Nirodh. Why you do that? So that you understand the foundation of thought. If thought is overactive in the mind, can you see the foundation? You can't see it. So you are asked to remove thought. Whether you do that or you use inquiry as a great means. Inquiry is something, for the inquiring mind. Inquiry is like an arrow. It will take you into the reality about something. So you can use any method. You can combine Yoga Vedanta also. But use a very solid method like this in order to go into the heart of reality. Because if psychological reality predominates your mind, you are not going to come to existential reality. Existential reality is the reality of awareness. The basic fact of your existence is awareness. You will not come to that if mind activity predominates. And if negative mind activity predominates, well, God only has to save. Really, because it's very difficult to turn your mind towards the truth if there are negative emotions in the mind. So all this has to be clear. Psychological problem, then definitely you need clarity there. So take up some path, some yoga, some method, clear the thing, and you will come to existential reality. Remember, psychological facts, psychological reality is perceived in the Sukshma Sharir, the mind. But existential reality is not in the mind, it's a totally different dimension. You clear the mind to go there. It actually happens in the Karan Sharir. Existential experience, existential inquiry should go to that level for you to perceive truth. So the actual existential problems that Vedanta is dealing with is not even the confused modes of our mind, which we were talking of. Adhyas is superimposition at a very deep level. It is not this psychological superimposition. Anger, fear, hatred, all this deflecting reality, it's not about that. All this we are supposed to clear up in order to come to understand what existential superimposition. How am I seeing Brahman as the world? Why do I see diversity where there is an underlying unity? All saints tell us God is right here, but I am seeing everything so different. So how do I come to this? This is an existential question. And you have to come to the existential level. Karan Sharir, Adhyas takes place there actually. And the clarity has to come there. That is why. So for this, we have a number of techniques. I will try to illustrate it to you in very simple ways. You know the very famous example of snake and rope. Classic Advaita Vedanta. You are, okay, let me put it in our context. Suppose you are on having a walk here around this house, and you notice in the twilight hour, always adhyas takes place in twilight hour, dusk. Why? There is insufficient light. Please see this. If there is insufficient clarity in the mind, superimposition will take place. Now, there you find suddenly a piece of what looks like a rope, a long piece of rope. From a distance it looks like a rope, but as you get closer you are suddenly scared. Fear enters your mind. It could be a snake, something long like this stretched out in front of you. So then, well, your dad on the other side of the house tells you, hey, don't worry, I left a rope there in the morning, jump and come. But you cannot jump because it appears like a snake. It's even glistening. So then you feel, what should I do? Then, well, in today's context, what today's youngsters will do is they will remove their mobile, put the torch, throw light. You throw light on the rope and you see it is a rope. It's not a snake. So then you jump over and you go and, well, report to your father, yes, it was a piece of rope. Now you see what is happening is, there are no two things, rope and snake. There is only one thing, rope, which you are mistaking for a snake. Why? Due to insufficient light and due to the fear in your head. Once you clear the fear and throw more light, you will see reality as it is. Clearing the fear in our head means psychologically you must be very clear. I told you, clarity of mind is the source of knowledge. Right? Clarity of mind. If the mind is very clear, today's students we tell this, if the mind, you keep it clear enough, you don't have to concentrate hours and hours on your study. You can soak up the information if the thought process is very clear. So this is the first requirement in Vedanta, psychological clarity. And the second thing is, yes, you must throw more light on the matter. If this very world is God, why do I not see it as that? If consciousness underlies everything, why do I not perceive it? Because basically the voltage of awareness in our system is very dim. Very dim voltage. How do I know this? You see, just observe your mind and see. Just now you can observe your mind. You will see thoughts are dominating, not awareness. Awareness is for many people another thought. If you remove thoughts from your mind, I will tell you awareness remains over, but for most people unawareness remains over. They fall into sleep when they remove thoughts from their mind. But through training, that is what yoga is meant for actually. Any form of yoga, whether it is Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga or Raj Yoga, the path of meditation, any yoga will do this for you. It will bring great clarity into your mind. It will enhance your awareness, the awareness content in your mind. So when you remove thoughts, you are fully aware. You are aware of the absence of thoughts, absence of vrittis. This is a great state to attain in itself. So then you understand awareness is primary. Thoughts move in and out of that awareness. Thoughts are not the primary aspect of your being. So once you come to this conclusion by yourself, you have enhanced or cultured awareness as it were. Using that as light, you will be able to perceive this world as God. Enhancing awareness in our own perception is vital to seeing reality as it is. If my own awareness is very dim, blocked out, and overpowered by the thought process, you will understand these things very clearly if you practice a little intense meditation. If thoughts are booming in my mind, there is no chance of awareness manifesting there. The very purpose of removing thought is so that awareness comes into full play. And that is why all these disciplines of yoga, starting from the very basic moral disciplines to high-level meditations, they are all meant for this, to bring you this clarity in your perceptions. And by this what happens, you will see that it is names and forms which cause the diversity, not the content. The actual content of this universe is only consciousness. Names and forms, if they predominate my mind, that triggers only psychological reality. So then I am interpreting the world as being very diversified, full of various objects, mind-boggling diversity everywhere, I don't see the underlying unifying factor. I don't see that at all. So if I increase, or let us say bring into full blossom my own awareness through meditation, through all these practices, you will see consciousness is the reality of everything. Name and form is superimposed on that consciousness. Just like how, now look at this bottle. We can take this example. This bottle is actually steel, but it has a coating of plastic which is blue in color. It's actually a steel bottle. I opened it and drank water, so I know it's a steel bottle. Now tell me, is this more bottle or is it more steel? Tell me. Same thing. Steel or bottle? Steel in the form of bottle. Now, why do we say, Vedantically speaking, this is more steel than bottle? Because steel can remain without the bottle. Bottle cannot remain without the steel. If I remove the steel, there's nothing called a bottle here. Bottle depends upon the steel for its existence. Steel does not depend upon the bottle for its existence, right? So the reality here is steel, upon which I have superimposed a name and a form, and for my utilitarian, it has utilitarian value for me. So I give a reality to that name and form. I want it to be in this form. I want it to hold my bottle and my water. So I have made a bottle out of it. But the reality here is steel. The steel drishti is jnana drishti. In this very bottle, I should be able to perceive steel. For that, for some amount of time, you can set aside the bottle. Just see this. See this. It is name and form. Name of bottle and the form of bottle superimposed on steel. Nothing else. I have given so much reality to the name and form, I have forgotten about the steel. But the reality here is steel in a particular shape, with a particular name. So if I learn to see things in this wise, you will see this world also is like that. Names and forms superimposed on consciousness. You yourself are this. You are nothing but what you are calling me is nothing but a name and a form superimposed on consciousness. The reality about you is consciousness. That's the unchanging element in you. The unchanging reality about you. Everything else is superimposed. Today it is there, tomorrow it won't be there. It will change. It's temporary, it's transient. But the reality is consciousness. So also everything in this world is like this. This jnana drishti, if you develop, where are you going to develop it? You see, apart from the bottle, you will not develop it. The steel is right where the bottle is. Brahman is right where the world is. You as the Atman are right where your body and mind appear to be just now. Superimposition has taken place to such an extent that only mind and body we are seeing. But you know, that's why saints and sages, they have touched the reality of the Atman, so they see this very world as consciousness. They see Brahman everywhere. The name and form have become superfluous, superficial, outwardly. It doesn't impinge on their mind. There's a classic example of Mahapurush Maharaj, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. What a wonderful incident this is. You see, just observe this incident. It happened in Belur Math. It was Guru Purnima day. And everybody was going down to, people were filing in a line and long queues there, you know, on these festival days. And they were coming and offering their pranams to Mahapurush Maharaj. Swami Shivananji, he was a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. And he, you know what he was doing? He was also going down to everyone. Each one bending down and going like this. So one of his disciples said, Maharaj, why are you doing this? They are bowing down to you. Please accept their pranams. Why are you bowing down to them? And then Mahapurush Maharaj said, but I see them as Brahman. When they come very close, I vaguely see a form and but I am seeing only consciousness. So how can I not bow down? See, this is the knower of Brahman's drishti. He sees the reality as it is. We are seeing names and forms because we are identified with the name and form. What you are identified with, that only you are going to see at the very deepest existential level. This is true. That is why disidentification is so important. putting a little distance between me and my thoughts, between me and my ego, between me and my whatever emotions. Emotion is commotion in the mind. Putting a little distance between all this and you will see the reality as it is. You don't have to go anywhere to realize this. Please know this. It is right here, right now, all the time. This is the fact about you. Realization itself means what? Is it inventing something? Then it will be unreal. Please see. If your mind creation it is, it can't be called reality. Realization means knowing something which is already there. I came to know of it now. The steel was always here. I just realized it just now because I gave more thought to it. It's right where the bottle is. Brahman is right here all the time as consciousness. Name and form have become dominant in our minds. Superimposition has become dominant. It all starts with self-superimposition. I have identified with this body and mind and I consider this to be me. So I am not able to see the reality within myself. So I am not able to see the reality of the world. So the change must again occur here first. That is why spiritual practice. Sadhana is everything in spiritual life. I'm so happy to see young people here. You know, this is the time when you should plunge into sadhana. Human birth is meant for this. If you get something first hand when you plunge into sadhana. You don't have to believe then in anything. When you get something by yourself, you're totally convinced of these facts. And you get such strength in life. Then you know what the world wants you to be. You will not be that. You are a slave to nothing. This is the freedom which Swamiji speaks of. You become completely independent of everything. And in fact, you become capable of understanding everything very deeply. So you will be looked up to. You don't have to look up to anything. Isn't it? If you know the reality about something, then you become the master of that thing. So this is a great strength which Vedanta gives you. If you realize your own self, you become the master of this world of manifestation. Please see this. This is the great strength which Vedanta gives you, and this is what Vivekananda used to say. This is available to the human experience. Human birth is meant for this. Yesterday we discussed bhakti, today we are discussing jnana. They are not two different things. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, the highest bhakti and the highest jnana are one and the same thing. So penetrate whatever you feel intensely about is your path. Penetrate into that and everything will come into place. So sadhana is most important. It is not enough to really logically understand these facts. Logically they have a great appeal. They will convince your intellect. The next step should be I plunge into this realization. On an everyday basis, if you do it, in a few years' time, you will understand the sheer joy of this life and the meaningless joys of the world. Really meaningless compared to this. Isn't it? You are very well aware of it, so that's why you are here. So plunge into sadhana. This is something which you see anybody going to Thakur. What would become his next state? He would become a sadhak. Immediately going into some form of intense spiritual practice. This is very important. No matter where you are placed. Thakur used to say, Bone mone kone. You must make a place for sadhana. Intensity there. And everything will be wonderful in your life. This is the actual grace of God, you know. Grace of God comes in life in the form of knowledge and devotion, in deep understanding, in firm convictions within, and in devotion, in love of God, in firm discrimination, vivek. These are the real bounties of the Aishwarya of God. Of Thakur, this is the real Aishwarya. So if we become devoted to Thakur, all this will come into our lives. And this will make the human experience something very beautiful. It's not about running away somewhere or from somebody, or it's not about all that at all. It's about seeing reality as it is. The world is God. If I change, if I increase the voltage of my awareness. That is the point. I think we have covered about 45 minutes. Is it? 35 minutes. Okay. So then, let me give you a few quotes to this effect, which Swamiji says. He says, there is only one existence. You see, in Swamiji's Jnana Yoga lectures, you find this. There is only one existence. Names and forms makes it appear diversified. Only one existence. At least intellectually you should grasp this idea. From time to time you can feel it. You live amidst nature, it will give you that feeling that somewhere there is an underlying one single existence which is appearing in manifest forms, in various forms. That is why, Shankara says it's a world of appearance. You get the point? That is why he says Brahma Satyam Jagad Mithya. Here you can say, what can you say? Steel is Satyam, bottle is Mithya. To a certain extent, you understand that the name and form, the bottle is less real than the steel. This drishti, if you develop, you enter into the heart of Vedanta. Same thing with any object. Go to the fundamentals, you will see an underlying. Science has also come to this to a great extent. But it is difficult for science to accept the fact of consciousness. There they are struggling, that consciousness alone is there, because they consider it to be an epiphenomenon of the brain. It's a creation of the brain. So whatever it is, from the Vedantic standpoint, how is Vedanta studied? Phenomenologically, by yourself, through yourself. How does an experience feel to you? This is how you study it. You employ vichara as a very powerful tool, isn't it? See, today's is a knowledge society. You are all intellectual people. Vichara is the tool to get into Vedanta. You can never disbelieve your own thinking, isn't it? If it's acute enough, it will take you to reality. And then what more is required? Clarity of perception is required. Everything is about clarity. There's a psychological reality, there's an existential reality. If you clear the mind, you arrive at psychological reality, which I illustrated to the stump of the tree. You come without any emotion in your head, you will see the stump as a stump. And existential reality, of course, if you transcend this merely Sukshma Sharir, go to the level of Karan Sharir, you will understand the concept of Adhyas perfectly. See, I am always self-aware, yet I am identified with this body and mind. How can this be possible? It's your own experience. Right now, please see this. You are always self-aware. Many times thinking, occasionally identified with body. But you assume you are body and mind. How is this happening? This is Adhyas. Although you know very well, self-awareness is your real nature. Most of the problem is occurring because the world expects you to be identified with the body and mind merely. So, Vairagya means this, distance yourself from this world, which falsely superimposes things on you. Then you will understand more clearly. Once you have distanced yourself, plunge into spiritual practice. Basically, it means enhancing awareness. If you are able to do that, you are throwing more light on reality. Through your own mind you are doing it. Please see this. Mind is the only instrument you have. Isn't it? What equation Thakur gives us here about mind and self? He says the pure mind is the Atman. The very pure clarified mind is the Atman. That is not of the nature of thoughts. That is the very foundation of the thought process. That is pure awareness. So, he gives us these simple equations. Pure mind is equal to pure buddhi is equal to pure Atman. Take ki kore jana jaye, bodhe bodh kora jaye, he says. You can know it by an intuitive investigation. That this is the nature of the I. The reality about the I is this. And once you are clear about this, your very perception, your drishti will change. There is this saying in Vedanta, Drishti jnanamayam kritva pashet brahmamayam jagat. Drishti bhaktimayam kritva pashet krishnamayam jagat. As will be your inner change, so will you perceive reality. So that is why sadhana. If the change was to be made there, out there, fixing this and fixing that one and fixing... Can you ever make change like that? Tell me. Whom will we fix? Your mind, if it touches reality, it gets the power to control other minds, to inspire other minds. That's the greatest change you can make. So first bring it into your life through sadhana. There is no substitute for sadhana, you should know this. We may give talks and lectures and all that. Primarily our life is based on sadhana. This should be part and parcel of your life. Every day if you are not sitting, if deeply you have not called on God, you must feel insecure. You must feel insufficient. Then you have entered into the spiritual life. And Brahmananji Maharaj, what he used to say about spiritual life, when does it begin?
After Samadhi.
After Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Because then only you have awakened to full awareness. No, until then it's all diluted, intermittent awareness, already invested in the thought process. You are actually living a kind of life which is based on other confused minds. Because thought is nothing but what? It's coming from outside in a way. What you are seeing, you are thinking about that. So there is no authenticity about this experience. So you feel always insecure, you feel depressed. These are all existential problems. I'm not talking of psychological problems. Existential problems, you feel lonely, you don't like it, you feel insufficient, you feel unfulfilled. The reality of existential problem you should start feeling. Then you will find an existential solution. You will enter Vedanta. So it's all available to us. Today we are living in a very remarkable age where the very highest ideas are available to us. The inspiration is available to us. Now it depends on us what we do with that. Bring it into your life and the rest will follow. You see, questions like, will I be able to function in this world if I get into this very deeply? They don't arise. Because I am telling you, the more you enter into spirituality, at the time of your sadhana, there may be a little struggle. You want to avoid negative people. You don't want to talk with your boss who is very dominating. All this may happen. But as you enter deeply into spiritual life, a deep level of reverence and respect and love comes for all creation. In fact, you will relate to others in a very deep way, in a way which will just invoke respect in others. You don't have to try, respect is not meant to be demanded, meant to be commanded. You want others to respect you, you must become like that. The whole world will follow you. So the point is this, Uddharet Atmana Atmanam, as the Bhagavad Gita says, raise yourself by yourself, you are perfectly capable of it. Especially this group is so intense, I am so happy to see this. The place where I work also, there is a group like this. And they are intent upon this. They are yogis in a way. Yogis deeply into this. They do all their everyday activity and they say it just goes on. It's going on. I'm not doing it. It's like that, you see. Whatever you are doing, your hands and feet, how much are you aware of it? Does your heart beat with your permission? Or any organ functioning with your permission? It's happening by itself. Allow it to happen by itself. You engage your mind in your pursuit. This is the nature of a yogi. The inner life is so developed. He's absorbed in that. So there are a number of people in this world who are doing this very intensely. If you are intent and intense, you will connect naturally with such minds. So today it is all available to us. So don't ask me the question, how can I do it with this mind work? How can I do it here in Cedar Rapids? There is no here and there. Time and space are in the mind. So just work on your sadhana and everything will come to you. Thakur etai chaiten, please know this. Thakur wanted us to become like this. If you truly love him, you know what loving a person means? Becoming like that person. That's the nature of love. You become like that person. So if we really love Thakur Swamiji, become like that. Thakur radiated spirituality, purity. He simply radiated that. So this will come into our lives. So with this, I pray that these sessions which we are having here, may Thakur bless us with devotion, knowledge, with deep understanding. May He make our sadhana fruitful, and may we develop the love of God and knowledge of God in this very life. With this prayer, I end my talk.
Dive deeper.
Yes, very good question.
Causal.
Yes, yes. See, this is a problem which every yogi encounters. What next? Once you have arrived at that stage where there is thoughtlessness but complete awareness, what next? The thing is, there's a saying in yoga, yogo yogena jnatavyo, yogo yoga pravartate, which means only yoga can teach you about yoga. That stage itself will point to the next stage. Usually it leads to absorption at that level. You are absorbed in the state of thoughtless awareness. You are completely aware, the mind is free of thoughts. What a superb state that must be, you just imagine. As it intensifies, you will understand what is meant by consciousness. Why our scriptures keep insisting consciousness is the fundamental reality. This will become very clear to our perception. So it is only by the power of yoga, whatever you understand by that yoga, by yoga I mean intense meditation. That itself will teach you how to proceed further. You see, Karan Sharir, the causal body, what we are saying, that is the last block before you enter into the knowledge of the Atman. So you have to encounter these problems in order to transcend them. And it is only the power of sadhana which shows you the path we should follow. The mind will not dictate you there, don't worry, not this mind definitely. It's the power of sadhana which will push you. And of course the grace of the Guru. That's the main thing. It's the grace of God and the Guru which takes us forward in spiritual life.
So when your mind is free of thoughts, all that is left is awareness?
Yes. Look at this child, He was listening so seriously. That's true, you try it for yourself. I was meditating at your age. If you free your mind of thoughts, see what remains over. And then you bring in only the kind of thinking you require. Only good emotions, noble emotions, devotion, only this should come into the mind. This is what human experience is about. Not being carried away by some negative thought and then realizing after a long time and trying to come back. No such thing. In a sadhak's life, all this is simply removed. Such focused thinking, focused mind. You try it. This is the age when you can achieve it actually. Yes, anything else? Yes?
Is there a way to identify a realized soul?
Yes. See, realized people, they have a totally different aura of intense peace and complete conviction. They will not budge from their stand because that's reality for them. And they exude peace. Peace and nobility. Just, when they say when the Buddha walked, for about 2 miles radius you could know the Buddha is around. By the stillness and the peace which he exuded. Thakur, when you must have read these incidents, in Balram's house, Thakur is sitting and then the kirtan starts, Thakur starts dancing. The kind of atmosphere he created, anybody entering into Balram's house would be gripped by that atmosphere. And they would enter into that state of bhav. When they entered into the room, they would find themselves dancing in bhav samadhi. So this is how you can know a realized soul. He will simply usher you into his thinking and his bhav. Yes?
I have two
Yes.
questions.
Yes. Next, please. She's
Okay.
yeah.
Is awareness same as consciousness?
No. You see, just now what we are calling awareness is the consciousness reflected in your mind. That is what we are calling awareness just now. As you continue with your sadhana, this very awareness intensifies. What I am calling culturing awareness or enhancing awareness. It intensifies. When it intensifies and becomes crystal clear, you will understand what is meant by consciousness. It has nothing to do with mind. Consciousness has nothing to do with mind. It's totally separate from mind. It is the supreme Purusha. It has nothing to do with Prakriti. But awareness is still invested in Prakriti. It is the consciousness reflected off your mind. You have to work only with that awareness. You have nothing else to work with. You get the point. You work on it, you increase it, you intensify it, you make it crystal clear through your sadhana. It takes a long time to do all this. And then you arrive at the state of pure consciousness. You arrive at it, not that you attain it or you actually become it. Because the I in you is that pure consciousness only, presently reflected in the mind. And you have assumed you are the mind.
One more. There is so much of concept of Brahman that's taught in Advaita Vedanta.
Yes,
And so much of name and form concept also.
yes.
So as a basic fundamental student, is there no conflict created in mind upon which one side I have to know that it is Brahman, that's ultimate and pure consciousness. But one side there is name and form. Is there no conflict created in the mind?
Yeah, conflict will be created only if mentally I have not separated the two. See, I told you, I must be able to see steel in this, not just the bottle. Although in appearance it's a bottle. The name and form impinges on my senses, and so I declare it's a bottle. But Brahma Drishti, Jnana Drishti actually means I am seeing steel. I know it to be in the form of this bottle at present. If you bring this down, it will be steel. It will go back to its essential element. So also I should be able to see it in this bottle itself. This is Jnana Drishti. You don't see them as separate. You see here if I say, well, I see the bottle, where's the steel? Show me the steel, I don't see the bottle. Now these kids can say that. Where's the steel? I see only the bottle. But we know very well the steel is right where the bottle is. In fact, the bottle is steel with a name and form. So also everything in this world, you see, take any example, take this table for instance. It is wood in a particular name and form. Take this plastic, anything you take, you can go to the fundamentals. Name and form have been superimposed and I have given them ultimate reality. That's why the appearance is real just now. But if you go to the heart of the matter, you will see it is something else. So once I understand this why these examples are given, you see the water and the babe example, gold and ornament, again and again Vedanta uses them. Why? To draw your attention to the fundamental fact that reality is always there, even where you are seeing appearances. You don't construct reality. You just remove appearance in your mind. Not even you remove the bottle. If I remove the bottle, I remove the steel as well. Oh. I'm sorry. So you don't remove anything. You just see reality as it is. Here what's the reality? It is steel appearing as bottle. Isn't it? So also Brahman is appearing as the world. You pure consciousness are appearing as this so and so. This is the actual fact. Brahma Drishti is required to perceive reality. Yes,
Oh,
you
good. Many years back, when I was a young man, I first heard the word existentialism.
Yeah.
That was from Jean-Paul Sartre, a French writer, philosopher. It
Yeah.
went all over my head.
Okay.
And now, since you are quoting it in context of Upanishad, first I want to know what does it mean in Sanskrit? I want to know the Sanskrit word, and in which Upanishad I can refer to existentialism.
Okay. Existential reality is, you see, the separation is made mainly in Vedanta.
Okay.
Only in Vedanta you will find existentialism in its purest form. Because they say that existence is the basic fact of life. Every Upanishad will give you this. The very definition of God.
No,
Yes.
what is it actually called in Sanskrit? So that I can refer.
It is Sat, being. Yes. Is
Well, I'll
existence.
accept that.
Yeah. Sat, being. The reality about something is the fact of being. That is why it manifests as that particular thing. You must be able to separate this. You see, name and form. Now if I say this is only a mic, it appears to be a mic. The basic thing here is there is something here.
Yeah, we read about that in Chandogya Upanishad.
Yes, existence is the fact. Yeah. So that's why God himself is called Satchidananda.
Okay,
He
thank
is fact. He is the fact of being. And he is consciousness, and because he is consciousness, he is blissful. Yes, this little girl has a question.
So you get the snake and the rope example. So before you actually put the light or like you clear your mind and actually see the rope, for you the rope is basically the snake.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. You see, she's put a good question. So this is a fact about human life. If I don't throw sufficient light, what am I going to do? I'm going to fear the snake, which is not actually there. I am not just going to fear, I am trying to bring in means to remove the snake, to kill the snake, which is not there. You know, you'll either try to bring a stick or run away to call somebody to help you. Something of this sort will do. You see, when you encounter problems in life, our everyday problems, we don't look at them deeply at all. Many times they are purely psychological problems, self-created many times. And if at all we encounter existential problems, we do not throw the light of awareness on them. We get enmeshed in the problem. Because of the simple fact, fear has already entered our minds. If fear enters your mind, you will, even if somebody throws light and tells you, see, that's a rope, still the fear can linger, you know. It can linger. Your heart is still thumping although you are seeing the rope. Because you're so scared of snakes. So this can happen. So the point is this, why they are giving us this example is, we must learn to enhance our awareness levels. Then Vedanta becomes very crystal clear. It's not a matter of mere thought. Vichar. You use thought as a means to go into an enhanced state of awareness, where Vedanta becomes crystal clear. You use thought as a means. That's the value of thought. I'm not saying thought has no value. You are using thinking as a means. You know, Raman Maharshi used to give this famous example. Yeah, you light a pyre with a log of wood. And then what happens? The pyre absorbs the log. Isn't it? So you use vichar as that log of wood to light the pyre of full awareness. And then it will consume the vichar. Because you are ushered into the state of pure awareness. Brahmavid brahmaiva bhavati. It is not an objective knowledge. You are becoming that. The knower of Brahman becomes Brahman. This can only be known in the state of yoga, I'm telling you. In the state of deep level meditation, you can know this. What? Knowing by being means what? You can only know it in the state of meditation. So Vedanta is not just about thinking. Thinking is a tool you use to penetrate into the experience. Yes?
I'm hesitating to ask this,
but it would be very inspiring if you could share some of your meditative experiences.
See, usually whatever is very sacred to our lives is kept secret. But of course, there are certain things which we can share. Let me tell you this. If mind energy invested in objects itself gives you so much of joy that everyday life is possible, imagine that mental energy concentrated completely on very sattvic objects. How much of joy should it give you? Meditation is an ultimately very fulfilling experience. If you just meditate on the physical form of Thakur even, you will be put into the state of Thakur. What was Thakur's state? Perpetual state? Samadhi. Just meditating on his physical form will put you into Samadhi. Because that is the nature of meditation. You become united with the object of meditation. Your mind will touch that, the source of what we are calling Thakur. So meditation is actually the most, if you ask me the most fulfilling experiences of life, I will say number one is meditation. Everything else is tertiary compared to that. And then the feeling of deep devotion, love of God. Even the devotion which we offer to saints, that's a very, very, very elevated state. So these two are the most, I think, the cream of the human experience. Devotion and pure knowledge. Meditation gives you these. Then that's why you know you can give up the world. It's like this actually. There is nothing called renunciation for renunciation's sake. You are renouncing because you have something better. There is work for work's sake, there is love for love's sake. There is no renunciation for renunciation's sake. You have given up because there is something much, much better. Yes. Yes.
So, the Mittals have asked the question, and this will sound like I'm beating a dead horse, but going back to the Karana Sharira and your response that sadhana will take you there, I'm really interested to know, can you give us a couple of hints about
sadhana?
And the question that Mittal asked.
Karana Sharira.
Yeah, how to transcend.
Actually, I may add one more thing to what you're asking, that give us some idea about how do you meditate?
Okay, I'm more interested in how to, like, the sadhana part of it,
Yeah.
Because
meditation is the sadhana.
Yeah. Because I'm definitely half baked, but maybe even less baked. And when you were talking about consciousness, and we are all one, the thing that came to my mind is Maslow's hierarchy. So if you are at that point of self-realization, as someone who's not there, the thing that I thought about immediately is, you have goals. Okay, you have to make this much money, you have to make your children do this. When you're at that self-realization point though, and I mean, can you please talk a little bit more about the sadhana and about Mittal Das?
You see, the apex of Maslow's pyramid was self-actualization. So after getting when all survival needs are satisfied, when your intellectual needs are satisfied, security needs are satisfied, everything is satisfied, still the mind will keep telling you what more is there to experience.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
This is the beauty of the human birth. No matter what you get in this life, you try for everything. This is what we tell our youngsters. Explore all possibilities, and still your mind will keep telling you what more is there, what more can I have, where is the ultimate fulfillment. So that is when you understand the need for what we are calling self-realization, what he called self-actualization, which means knowing yourself without anything, unidentified with anything, just by yourself. Is that level of joy, happiness possible? Is something called existential awareness possible? Is this the reality about me, or just what these five senses have to offer? Because all our survival needs have to do with the five senses, the joys they bring us. So is there anything beyond this?
Joys and quotes.
And Maslow also made this statement that the way to change a man is to change his awareness of himself. So you have to penetrate into self-knowledge at some point in some life, somewhere, somehow. it will become a constitutional necessity at some point of time. So it's good to have this background knowledge of Vedanta at any point so that you can make the penetration. He asked me about tips in meditation. See, I'll give you some very important tips which all of us can practice. The way to meditate is you must learn to bring stillness into your system. Usually our whole body and mind are in tremendous motion. Mind is overactive for many of us, and thought is just happening, isn't it? Are you thinking? Many times thought is happening. You are not thinking. Please see this. 8 hours time means in this condition, it is difficult to meditate. So learning to put a distance between me and my thought. Thought should not be happening. When thought enters my mind, I should be able to feel it, sense it, and that's why I control it. If it's just happening, it will carry me away in no time. So I say bringing stillness into your body and mind is important. You are at the point of changelessness. Activity is going on around you, even thought activity. So to achieve this, first of all, learn to still your body. If you completely still the body for 5-10 minutes at least, that's quite a long period actually. But if you learn to still your body for a considerable period of time, the mind will go still. They are connected. And regulate your breathing. Use breathing as a tool to do this. Long, deep breathing, and the mind will become very calm. Once you have achieved a calm state of mind, you bring in a divine image there. See, meditation on just anything, we don't call that meditation. It's called concentration, not meditation. It is only a being like a very sattvic object. Only that can usher you into a very deep state. An ordinary object cannot do that. That's why we say meditate on Thakur, Ma, Swamiji, some symbol of holiness, symbol of elevation. And where should you meditate? In the heart center. The life energies, the vital energies in our system should be raised to the heart. Meditation is not meditating anywhere. Today if you go to Google, they will recommend all sorts of things and they are calling it meditation. Only if the concentration is at the heart center, it is to be called meditation. Why? That is the door to real knowledge. Life energy should dwell here. Then only it is possible. These are all key points in meditation, because if the life energy is not upheld here, thought becomes very scattered. Only at the heart level, if you raise pranic energy to the heart, thought will come under control. Shaijane anahater mahatmya eta.
Yeah, how about Ajani? Sometimes they talk about Ajani Chakra.
Yeah, Agnya Chakra also it can be raised, but the safest place is the heart. Mother says this. Holy Mother says this. Once Thakur, he drew the Shat Chakras and explained to Mother. Then later she regretted that I didn't keep that paper. But he drew and showed her how the mind behaves at every level. If the focus is below the heart center, the thought activity will be very distracted, and you can't control thought at that level. But if you concentrate at the heart center on a holy image, you can bring the whole mind into your hands. This is meditation. One of my talks in IIT, I have extensively covered meditation. It's called Existential Inquiry and Meditation, the talk. You can watch the talk. Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
You were talking about the stumps. When, if you were emotional, you would just think the stump was a stump. But if this person was very superstitious and still had some fear in them, but they weren't thinking of the fear at the moment, so at the moment they were unemotional, when they saw the stump and they saw the shadow, they could still think that it was something special, would they?
Yeah, he's right. He's right. You see, the point is this, that suppose they are superstitious, but at that point there was no fear in their mind. Still he would see the stump as the stump is saying. So that's a fact. At any given point of time, you can see reality as it is if your mind is not colored, That's the point. So clarity of mind is the very first step actually. All these yama and niyama disciplines of yoga are meant for this, to bring that clarity, and then you penetrate. That's the point. So anything else?
Yeah.
Mother, I have a question now.
Yes.
This is about dream analogy.
Dream analogy, yeah.
So the dreamer has a perceived reality during the dream state where there is meaningful joys and meaningful sorrows. But after waking up, the waker has a perceived reality where those dreamers' happiness and unhappiness do not matter. They are unreal now.
Correct.
So from this perspective, for a realized soul, what is the motivation to help the world?
Very good question. You see, it's a real Vedantic question. If the world is indeed a dream, illusion, it's a mere appearance, what should be the motivation to help? In a dream, you don't want to help anybody, isn't it? After all, it's a dream. The thing is, for a realized soul, he understands that the value of a dream. See, amongst these three states, he is not a mere waker. He is a person in Turiya. He understands a dream also can be so painful. So also he is able to relate to a dream can be very painful. For the dreamer who is dreaming of a tiger chasing him, full of fear and agony and anxiety, for him at that moment, see, it's absolutely real in the dream, isn't it? The dreamer has no idea of the waking state. Otherwise he wouldn't be the dreamer. The dream is 100% real to the dreamer. So he suffers a whole range of emotions or enjoys a whole range of emotions in the dream. Now this is something which a person in Turiya will acknowledge. So for him, helping the dreamer dream better dreams is a possibility.
Yes.
He is not insensitive to pain. Even if pain is an appearance, you see, pain is always an appearance. The fact that you are feeling it means you have objectively perceived it. It is always an appearance. Only thing, little children, if the mummy is not around, it's okay, pain is tolerated. But if mummy is around, they will scream and yell and try to get sympathy. Why they do this? Everyone knows, once they grow up a little, immediately they know the pain is felt, which means it is an object of your experience. It is an appearance. But we invest reality in appearances because we don't have anything better to experience just now. So yoga helps you get that better experience so that you can give all these realities their place. You understand? This is what actually happens. If I have not found something better, I would only want good dreams rather than bad dreams. When I am awakened to reality, I give any dream its place. But an awakened person is sensitive to bad dreams and will try to convert them into good dreams. That is there. They are not insensitive people. Men of realization become very sensitive, in fact. Like a mother's heart it becomes. Look at mother's life. The best illustration. Mahapurush Maharaj, I think, used to say, Turiyananji Maharaj used to say that mother's mind never comes down from the Vishuddha Chakra. There and above that only it dwells. And yet how she was catering to the smallest needs of every person. So full of love and affection and service. Everybody who came into mother's ambience felt like a child. They have written in their reminiscences. Everybody who went to Jairambati, what power is this, you see? A woman who is able to make everybody feel like that. This is the nature of a goddess. Goddess means this, not just having 4 arms and fighting with asuras. She makes everybody feel like this, like they have come to the lap of their mother. Such a sattvic, we don't know of any goddess who was more motherly or a mother who was so godly. Isn't it? Their lives are the illustration to understand Vedanta. Reaching the highest, yet how they behaved. We'll close the session here. Thank you very much. We really enjoyed coming here and interacting with all of you. Really, may Thakur Ma Swamiji bless you with the highest knowledge and devotion. This is our prayer at their feet. Jai Ma.